for the first time in Boy Green Meets Wudi history, we're about to meet somebody else. Okay, we got a draft expert who's going to be going through the ins and the outs of different prospects as we are 9 days, count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 days away from the draft. It's time to meet him. It's time to talk. Boy Green Meets Wudi coming up right now.
It is unequivocally the Super Bowl for New York Jet fans.
Field Yates, baby. Field gosh darn Yates. Let's bring him on the show.
Come on, people. Connor Rogers is joining the show. What's up, Connor? But Trevor gosh darn Sycamore, baby, for me, personally, my favorite New York Jet of all time.
Wow, it's great to be on. What an intro that was right there.
Paul, nobody does an intro like you, man.
Paul, you give the best intro of literally any podcast that I've ever been.
I'm gonna lose my gosh darn bananas.
Welcome. It is another episode of Boy Green Meets Wudi. It is your boy, James Wudi. There's a lot of firsts going on, Boy Green. This is the first time that we're bringing someone on. This is the first episode where your boy has upgraded. He done blown up and got Google Fiber, all right? So if I'm out here talking like something is wrong, I got to call somebody else because your boy has Google Fiber now. Forget about Spectrum. I was telling Mike Williams, and that's why he's not a Panther. Clowney, he's still suffering. Anyway, let's bring in our guy, Boy Green. How are you doing today?
Well, obviously, I'm doing spectacular. We're 9 days away from the 2024 NFL Draft, and we're going to the guest line for the first time in Boy Green Meets Wudi history. All right, I've been doing it on my own show a lot, but let's expand the network. Let's bring in a great buddy of mine. He covers the draft as great as anyone in the business. His name is Ryan Roberts at Rise N Draft. Rise, RISEN, and then the draft. Put that together. Booyah. That is the handle, College Sports Wire. Let's waste no more time. Let's bring him in. Ryan Roberts graces us with his presence. What's up, Ryan?
Not much, guys. How are you?
Excellent, man.
Doing great.
And I want to give a big shout out at the beginning of the show to Dom C. He's a draft analyst that's been joining me every Monday throughout this process in the mornings, and that's been a lot of fun. And one of the cool things he's put together for Jet fans is he's been keeping track of who the Jets have met with throughout this entire process: combine visits, pro day visits, private visits, top 30, Senior Bowl, everything. So we have this comprehensive list of like 40, 50, 60, 70 guys that the Jets have met with. And me and Wudi have put together top fives of these lists of the most intriguing names. And we thought, who better than Ryan Roberts to get, we got the homework here. We need you to give us the answers to the test with the draft coming up right around the corner. We got intriguing names, but we need to know more about them. And so do crazy Jet fans everywhere, because these are the players the Jets are actually looking at for one reason or another: high-end picks or even late-round picks. And I'm curious what the Jets see in them of interest, Ryan. So we're hoping you can provide us the answers to these questions.
Well, I mean, first and foremost, Wudi, I forgot to mention, man, that was a great intro, by the way. A lot of energy there. And Paul, I mean, I feel like you're setting me up for failure here, man, but I will do my absolute best to give you as much information as I possibly can. I got you guys.
Well, I appreciate that. And also, like I said, a quick shout out. We are live in 3 different places: youtube.com/BoyGreen25. Thanks, everybody. Twitter @BoyGreen25. And on Instagram, the James Wudi, joining us here on the program. Now, I'm going to work my way backwards here, go 5-1 on my list of most intriguing. Me and Wudi will go back and forth, try to get intel from you, Ryan, and try to sponge some of this. Now, here's a player the Jets are meeting with right now as we're speaking. They are meeting with this man. His name is Muhammad Kamara. He is the Colorado State pass rusher. And Rich Cimini of ESPN was the one who gave that up from his source, so we appreciate that. and he has been compared from Rich Cimini as a Bryce Huff-like type player who the Jets lost in free agency, $51.1 million to the Philadelphia Eagles. So they're trying to find a Bryce Huff replacement, and just because, as Robert Saleh said at the annual league meeting, you can never have enough pass rushers. This guy's wildly intriguing. The age is all over the place. The production is insane. So what can you tell us about this guy? The Jets are looking at him. I want to know more intel.
You know, I'm a little bit tough on people's comps sometimes, but I actually like the Bryce Huff comp. I think it makes a whole lot of sense. He's a little bit of a lightly built, sawed-off pass rusher. You know, he really is kind of that, what would traditionally be a 3-4 outside linebacker, but obviously in the world of sub-package, we're playing a lot more 4 down than just true 3-4 alignment, right? So the base defense doesn't matter quite as much as it once did, but he's that type of young man who, honestly, when I watched him, I thought technician. You know, like he plays obviously with great efforts. He really understands how to bend and manipulate the outside track. He's a bendy kid, but I would say he's more of he understands how to reduce angles. You know, like it's like a Nick Bosa type, as far as Nick Bosa is not the bendiest guy of all time, but what he understands is how to set guys up and to soften angles a ton. And that's a similar thing that Kamara brings to the table, right? And then he went to the combine and blew the place up. Like, I mean, I'll be honest, I was not expecting 4.57 or whatever the heck he ran in the 40-yard dash in Indianapolis. It was a impressive time to say the least. But he's a young man that I think will at least be able to do some designated pass rush roles early on in his career. From there, it's similar to Bryce Huff, right? Is how effective can he be on early downs? How effective can he be on run downs? And even if he's not, the modern NFL has told us that we still need pass rushers, right? We still, whether that is he comes in on 3rd downs, we reduce a Jermaine Johnson to more of an interior rusher on obviously passing situations. Like when you have that type of opportunity and that type of alignment versatility, I think a guy like Muhammad Kamara, Mo Kamara, could be a guy that in the mid to late rounds could be a very valuable player for them.
Yeah, and just a quick follow-up on him. Dane Brugler, another great draft analyst in our business. In The Athletic, he had him graded as a 5th or 6th round pick. And basically for a lot of the reasons that both you said and that also I wrote a piece about it earlier today, that, again, he's an older prospect. He's 24. He turns 25 before he even starts his rookie season. And there's some of those tools that he has that are both intriguing, but at the same time, there's a couple of holes. Is that kind of the same projection you have for a guy like that?
Yeah. Mid to late rounds is kind of what I had him. I think I actually had a 5th or late 5th, early 6th as well. So like I'm right in the similar ballpark there. I actually remember, it's funny that, again, you mentioned the comparison to Bryce Huff, because I actually had Bryce Huff on the podcast before draft day when he came out a few years ago. And it is very eerily similar, right? Like, again, Kamara's not a guy that's going to come in day one and play 60% of the snaps and be able to be a guy that can really affect rundowns. Like, it's just not what he is. What he is a high motor, efficient pass rusher that understands how to get home. And he finished a lot of plays, obviously, especially this past year at Colorado State. So you can never have enough pass rushers. You can never have enough. I know that the Jets are well stocked there now, you know, with Hassan Reddick and Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald is hopefully having a sophomore breakout, but adding a guy like a Mo Kamara, if that's where the Jets tend to go, choose to go on day 3, I mean, you can never take that type of value at that point.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Hoping that because that's what we need. We need some value. And I'm actually confused, Ryan. I'm confused if you can clear this up for me, because right after the Super Bowl, you know, your boy was out here looking at all these mocks, and one name that I saw as one of the top tackles, maybe the top tackle, right, was Olu Fashanu. That was the guy that everybody was talking about. I mean, Boy Green knows I was out here singing, hoping that Joe Alt would fall, you know, right? I was out here, you know, singing, hoping for Joe Alt. But now, fast forward 2 months, and now Joe Alt is him, and Fashanu has fallen down. I mean, there are mocks out there by reputable guys where he's the 5th tackle taken. You know, what has caused this slide? Is it more on Fashanu, or is it these other guys improving their stock?
I would say it's the latter in that conversation. It's more about what others have done, not as much about what Fashanu has done. I think Fashanu is the same player that he was in 2022, but that's part of the problem, is that going into 2023, he was viewed as, man, he's going to take a big jump in year 2 as a starter, right? Because he was a guy that hadn't started a ton of football at Penn State. I mean, literally the his first year in 2022 as a full-time starter, I think he only started 8 games because of a little bit of an injury down the stretch of the season, right? So he was kind of viewed that, but I think what you saw was Joe Alt just took a major jump in 2023. He kind of solidified himself as that offensive tackle 1. I still think Fashano's in the running to be potentially the second or third guy off the board, but I think it also comes down to Talisi Fuanga out of Oregon State took a massive jump. Like, I liked him in 2022 off of 2022 film, but the 2023 film was different. It was just a completely different thing. And then you're running into the conversation of Amarius Mims, similar to what I just said, Fashanu, who doesn't have a ton of starts under his belt out of Georgia, but talking about physical gifts, he might be the most gifted guy of any of the offensive tackles in the class. And then some people are big fans of JC Latham. I have my pause with Latham personally, but I think when you look at a guy like a Fashanu, it just wasn't that he took a big jump, like that. Look, this is what he is. He is a tremendous pass protector on the next level, but you have major concerns over what is his impact in the run game on a down to down perspective. He's on the ground a lot. He doesn't latch really well in the run game. You know who he reminds me of? Funny, I've actually put this one in the universe, and it's funny, I'm on a Jet-centric podcast. He reminds me of DeBrickashaw Ferguson a lot, coming out of Virginia, right? And DeBrickashaw ended up being a great player for the New York Jets for a long time. And I think that Olu Fashanu, as a true blindside protector, who's maybe a slightly deficient in the run game, could still be a really good left tackle in the NFL. I just don't think he's all around as good as a couple of the guys that have kind of taken leaps. And unfortunately for him, I just think that he was kind of the same that he was in 2023. Still a good player, but he didn't take that ascension to being in contention to be the first offensive tackle off the board, in my opinion.
Brick. I love DeBrick. That's a phenomenal.
He's a great player, man. I used to love DeBrickashaw Ferguson. He was one of my favorite players growing up, honestly, offensive line-wise.
And you have great taste. And I will say that it's funny that so he retires, ends up playing a decade in the league. He played every snap of his career with the Jets except one. And he stepped out for a trick play, which Rich Cimini wrote this awesome article about a couple years ago, that the only snap he ever missed in his Jets career of 10 plus years was wild last second, ditch Hail Mary attempt where the only player that was in the game was like a center. Everyone else was some level of a skill position or defender. So I think Revis even got on the field, and Brick was on the sideline for that one snap. And
how did that play go? Did that play go okay?
Not good. Not good. It did not go good, which makes it even worse. But the greatest compliment you could give to an offensive lineman is to never say his name. And I think for a lot of those reasons, Brick went underappreciated. Like, I think all of us are saying, wow, man, he was great. But in the moment, because you never said his name, he just did his job, and he just wiped his side of the field, and it was fine. And it wasn't like he was this 10-time All-Pro. So again, he also went underrated from that standpoint. He didn't get the recognition that other really, really, really talented offensive linemen got. So when he left and the Jets had a musical chairs for a little while trying to figure out who is the replacement, hell, even still, Tyron Smith ends up being the left tackle for the Jets this year. That's been this pressing question of trying to figure it out from a rotation standpoint. So I love the call. That's great. I love DeBrickashaw. My question, though, is kind of coming off of what Wudi just said. Is it Joe Alt is clearly offensive tackle 1, and then it's everybody else? Because I've had the great pleasure in my business of I'm literally here at the radio station. My board is right over here, or at home on my digital shows. Every analyst I speak to seems to agree with the Alt thing, but then everyone else, people like Latham, people like Olu, people like Talise Fuaga, people, Field Yates loves Tyler Guyton. He has him way higher than other people do. So depending on the person, it seems like they're in a different order as soon as Alt ends. Are you in that same camp?
I mean, I am, right? I think that Alt is the number one offensive tackle. If we're being more predictive, though, and if you ask me, as far as how it will work itself out next week, I would say the only guy that I think could challenge for offensive tackle 1 off the board is Talisi Fuanga out of Oregon State, which hilarious. I was calling him Talise Fuaga for like the longest time, and apparently I was pronouncing it wrong for like a year and a half, which I found out about, which is pretty hilarious. But he's the only guy that I think can contend for it. There's been some JC Latham chatter recently, but again, we're in that time of year where if you hear it once, it's probably not true. If you hear it a couple times, it's still probably not true. It's when there's a lot of smoke that fire starts, right? And I just don't buy the Latham thing at this point. And I do buy that Fashanu is down the board for some teams overall. I think it is Joe Alt, offensive tackle 1 for the majority of teams. And I think Fuanga has his guy. Like the Jets, for instance, are actually one where if Joe Alt and Talisi Fuanga were on the board at the same time, I actually think they might go with the Oregon State Beaver. I honestly do. There's a little bit of intrigue there. The Jets and him are a pairing from a team and player perspective. I've heard a lot, man. I've heard a lot at this point. So there might be something there. But overall, I am an Alt guy without question.
I see. Okay, I'll do a quick follow-up just because we're dancing in the offensive line waters. I have one more offensive lineman on my list, and it is J.C. Latham. And I use, as we came up with this list of intriguing, because like I was against him, and then I'm okay, maybe I'm too against him. Oh, maybe I'm for him. No, never mind. I was against him. I'm that one gif of that lady going, no, yeah, well, doing a lot of that action with J.C. Latham. Where is it truly? I feel like sometimes people have overrated his bad plays and said, terrible. But on the other sense, when you try to look at the sample size and what he's produced, it seems like there's some conflicting things there as well. What's your take on J.C. Latham?
So the best scouts, in my opinion, learn from past mistakes. Okay. And one past mistake that I made early on in this evaluation stuff was offensive linemen that have some balance issues on the field don't usually end up being great. I mean, we can see a recent one. Again, we're not going to helmet scout here, but Alabama just had a guy that came out a couple of years ago named Evan Neal who had some balance issues on film. We chose to ignore it because he's got incredible length and a great body, and he's a really impressive athlete for his size. But it hasn't worked out for the New York Giants. And, part of that might be coaching, but I mean, I saw Andrew Thomas make a massive leap a couple years ago after being bad as a rookie too, and he figured it out, right? So I think offensive linemen, there's always the requisite. You want length, you want foot quickness, you want flexibility. Those things are all very important. The one hangup that I think that people don't talk about enough when evaluating offensive linemen, though, is balance, right? Like some guys just have really tight ankles, really tight hips, and they just, when they are latched and they're driving, they just are not able to sustain their footwork and sustain their balance throughout the entirety of their block, right? And I think that that's Latham to me, right? Like I would be okay with Latham late first rounds, for a team that's in a good position with a good offensive line coach. But if we're talking about him as a top 10, top 15 pick, which some people are doing, just too rich for me, man. It's just too rich for me. I've been burned by offensive tackles with balance issues in the past, and I see too much of that with J.C. Latham.
Again, the Jets met with, I'll try to do this for all the prospects we're talking about here, but the Jets met with J.C. Latham, both at his pro day and also at the NFL Combine. By the way, for Kamara, it was a top 30 visit, which, again, is happening right now. Plus, they met with him privately at his pro day. Go ahead, Wudi.
Yeah, I also am kind of curious about that, right? We're talking about a whole bunch of guys that have been met different ways, the top 30, right? The private workouts, their pro days, the Senior Bowl.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
How would you kind of organize those different types of visits in terms of like the most meaningful? Like what type of stuff is an organization picking up at a top 30 visit versus a private workout and stuff like that? How much weight should we put on those actions?
Well, obviously with the top 30, it's on your own turf, and you kind of get a little bit of you have more control over how that visit goes and what you talk about and how you manufacture the rest of the visit, right? Like, are you on the board? Are you touring the facility? Are you just talking ball? Are you talking personal stuff? Like, you have more time. You have more things in your court. When you're at a Senior Bowl, when you're at the Combine, you have a small amount of allotted time that you have to use wisely, because you just don't have a ton of it. That's why you always hear about these weird questions that people ask at like the Combine and the Senior Bowl and stuff, because it's almost like a psychological test, right? Like these guys have been putting through the ringer all day. I mean, I interview guys every year for the Indianapolis, for instance, right? Where some guys are up at 4 a.m. and don't get back to the room until 11. And then they have to wake up at 4 the next day. And just, they've been constant throughout the day. So I think that for those games, it's a little bit more psychological, and it's a very shorter amount of time. In the 30 visits, it's a lot more of you can structure it the way that you want to structure it and get the opportunity to get those guys in your facility. As far as the importance, from my experience, the 30 visits are actually a little bit more smokescreen usually, right? Like those ones are more where, they're bringing them in for a 30 visit. And then you always hear about the guys, and a lot of them that get drafted, and you're just like, I never went to the facility before. Like I barely talked to that guy. I would say the only string of consistency that I could come from visits is if a team is talking to someone constantly, right? Like one random 30 visit doesn't say much to me. One random time at Senior Bowl doesn't tell me something because most teams meet with just about everybody at the Senior Bowl. Like that's just kind of it. But if a guy is meeting with a team at the Senior Bowl and then at the combine, and then maybe they also bring him in for a 30 visit, like that's where the smoke kind of comes up. You have to understand, like at this time of year, it's about trying to paste together the picture, and the picture comes from consistency. That's kind of how you get through a lot of the smoke screen. Like who's saying what, how often are they saying it, where is the smoke versus the fire? And so I think that it's about the consistency of approach or conversation with teams.
That makes total sense. Total sense. So I'm gonna bring up somebody who has met with the Jets at the Senior Bowl and had a top 30 visit in Devontae Walker.
Yep.
I live in North Carolina, so if I'm trying to put on a college game, I'm 10 minutes away from the university. That's who I'm seeing, and I feel like the big consensus, if you will, is boom or bust. I haven't really heard that label applied to too many receivers. Most receivers, it's look at this ceiling, but we're talking boom or bust with Devontae Walker. What are some types of things that you think the factors at play that could cause him to boom versus bust? Like, would you agree with that assessment?
Yes, he's a big boomer bust guy. I have a comp for him, which is not a very nice comp that I'll kind of drop at the end, I guess. But so here's the thing with Tez. It's incredible backstory. I mean, so he's a North Carolina Central guy, I believe is where he was at originally. Never ended up playing because of COVID, right? So he ended up entering the transfer portal, went to Kent State, was really good his last year at Kent State in 2022, was dynamic. I mean, they had a couple guys that entered the transfer portal. Dante Cephas ended up at Penn State. I think he re-entered the portal this offseason. And then Tez obviously went down to North Carolina. And the North Carolina film this year, for me, was incredibly appealing, but also there were some maddeningly inconsistent moments. Like the hand strength and ability to win through contact, very inconsistent. He doesn't track the football well all the time either. Like there's some things that he needs to figure out. And then he went to the Senior Bowl, and he got his lunch money taken throughout the week, to be honest. I mean, like Cam Hart from Notre Dame and a couple other guys, like he just couldn't get off a press. He just wasn't able to match physicality and play strength. And for me, he's a guy that I think you need to bring along slowly. Like he needs to figure out how to get off the line consistently, if I could say that word. If he can run routes, track the ball better down the field. The height, weight, speed combination is dope. Like it's really appealing, right? Like, which is why he reminds me of Marquez Valdes-Scantling a little bit, which at times is pretty cool, but then at other times not consistent, obviously, right? So very boomer bust. He could end up being a very good vertically oriented pass game weapon, or he could be a guy that's a flash in the pan, will give you an occasional splash play, but then you'll be like, dude, but he's so maddeningly inconsistent that I don't think that we can play him at a high volume, right? Like that's the threat with the Tez Walker, in my opinion.
All right, let me go back because Woody was just talking about, the pro day versus this and importance. As someone who has been not to the combine, but I've been to plenty of Syracuse football pro days here in my backyard. But I enjoy consuming the combine from a distance as I have before. How much goes into it from that perspective? You're right. Top 30, you control everything. You kind of set the tone. You're saying what's happening, where it's going. On the pro day, the power shifts to the player. They've been running these drills or whatever they're going to do for months. So it's almost like it's almost like a concert of some kind, a choreographed performance of something they've been practicing, preparing for the entire time. And I don't know if this is ever true. I've never confirmed this, but when I was at the Syracuse pro day, they have the stopwatches. They're a little more trigger happy there in Syracuse on some of the players to what it was at the combine. For instance, a receiver, here's a deep cut receiver story. Amba Otawo, who is originally a Maryland guy who came over to Syracuse. At the combine, he ran a 4.49, which to Syracuse, people were like, oh, wow, thought he was a little faster. At Syracuse, he ran a 4.34, and we're like, Was that who was timing that stopwatch? That's the question. So I
Got the
use
quick
all
trigger,
that to
man.
say,
Got
yeah,
the quick
exactly.
trigger. Yep.
Yeah. So I use all that to say on the pro days, what do teams take from that? Because it's almost so choreographed and the numbers look so good and they're in the most perfect, pristine situations they've been practicing. It's their own turf, their own coaches, their own players they're playing with. What does that factor in? Do you have to take a little bit of a grain of salt with that evaluation as an NFL team perspective?
Oh, without question. So the most important parts of this process for teams evaluating outside of the film that they put on for 3+ years is the combine, because everyone's in the same environment, everyone's in the same situation, everyone's tired. Like no one's in a preferred situation at the combine, right? Same thing with the Senior Bowl. All those guys are treated exactly the same. They're the same allotted times. They're going through the same conditions, the same weather, the same everything. The pro day is very player friendly, to your point, right? So the reason that scouts are going there, for one, is there's usually players that choose not to do X, Y, and Z drill at the combine, so they need to get the official times on them. And then obviously they're doing their travels to make sure that, that kid's a pretty interesting player, but he didn't get a combine invite, so we need to get some verified information on him. As far as, I never listened to like a school will put out like, I'm just using Notre Dame as an example because I cover Notre Dame so closely. Like, this Aldrich Estime ran a 4.47. It's like, no, he didn't. No, he didn't. I don't believe you. I believe who I'm texting, and I'm texting Scout, and that actually didn't happen. But like, follow up at pro days with scouts of like, hey, what did you have on Aldrich today? What did you have on Aldrich? And they're like, 4.56 to 4.59. Cool. That's why they're there, right? They want to not only talk to them a little bit after the practice and everything and continue to that evaluation process, but they also want to get their own information, right? They're getting their hand times. They're getting all that verified info that they can, the heights, weights, and all that stuff. Obviously, the person running the event is getting those, but the scouts are getting their hand times and getting their verified information. So while it's on their terms, there's no doubt about it, they are still getting scouting times and not just some generic times that's being sent out to all NFL teams.
Fair enough. Let me jump to this is a player we talked about a lot. So sometimes there's like a Kamara who Jet fans are just getting used to now, actually hearing him at their team facilities and hearing more information about. But one player that's been the talk of the town on Jet social media is Brock Bowers. And I see this tweet from Ryan Roberts, Rise and Draft on Twitter. It says, we use the word generational way too often in scouting. Brock Bowers is generational. Explain, Ryan.
He's one of the 3 best players in this draft, regardless of positional value, in my opinion, right? Like positional value is going to move some quarterbacks up. It's going to move some offensive tackles up. It's going to move some tight ends down, typically as far as like how a board is constructed. But if you ask me who are the 3 best overall players in the 2024 NFL draft, Brock Bowers would be on that list, man. There's no doubt about it. I mean, I think that we have forgotten how good the young man is for a couple reasons, varying factors. One factor is that the Kyle Pitts thing is not really working out too well after his rookie year, right? So we saw the pass-catching dynamo tight end that was can't miss in Kyle Pitts, and a lot of guys are scarred by that from the scouting perspective, right? You're scarred a little bit. And fan bases, I think, are scarred about it. Number 2, Brock Bowers was banged up a little bit this year. He had started out really well, got hurt in the middle of the season, came back and was still awesome, really productive, but missed a few games. And then Georgia didn't win a national championship for the 3rd straight year. So like he wasn't on the cusp, and then he wasn't able to test throughout the process. Like there's a lot of factors that I think is why Brock Bowers has somehow become I don't want to say underrated because he's going to go top 15, right? But like an underappreciated player from fan bases. I mean, this kid who weighed over 240 pounds, which was a big threshold people wanted to see. But this kid is a special athlete, man. I have never seen, and Kyle Pitts was a freaky athlete at the tight end position, right? I have never seen start-stop ability at the tight end position what Brock Bowers says. They would throw him bubble screens at Georgia in the SEC against the best competition in the country, and he would dominate. And he was the best player. I think back to 2021. 2021, the pass catchers on Georgia were as follows: George Pickens, Jermaine Burton, A.D. Mitchell, Ladd McConkey, and who was the best pass catcher on Georgia in 2021 as a true freshman? It was Brock Bowers, man. We're just overthinking this too much. And he's a willing blocker, by the way. Kyle Pitts tried as a blocker, but he was a bad one coming out of Florida, if we're being honest with ourselves. Brock Bowers isn't. He's a sufficient blocker. He can do enough in that department, and he's a rare athlete. He is absolutely worthy of a top 10 pick. I believe that he is a generational football player, the best tight end that I've ever evaluated personally. I think that he is special.
And by the way, again, I said I would do this, and then I'm not. Top 30 visit, Pro Day, and NFL Combine, all three of those meetings, three situational sit-downs with Brock Bowers and the New York Jets. Go ahead, Wudi.
I am literally speechless right now, Ryan. I just hope you know you have officially made my Instagram story with that incredible breakdown of the wonderkind that is Brock Bowers. I will definitely be happy if his name is called for the New York Jets. So I'm going to switch from underappreciated in Brock Bowers to perhaps, is it fair to say overappreciated in this next player? Because we're looking for playmakers, right? Early rounds, late rounds. I personally am when someone says like, "Oh, this person's father used to do what they do," I'm like, "Oh, born in the business, born and bred," right? Brendan Rice.
Why are you asking me this one? Oh, why are you asking this one? Gosh. Yeah. I like to be as positive as possible, but I don't get the Brendan Rice thing. I've never gotten the Brendan Rice thing. Look, he is
definitely overappreciated.
Yes, he's definitely overappreciated. Wudi, I'm watching him at the Senior Bowl, and people are like, are highlighting him on these plays where I'm like, that ball is dead. That ball's not getting off because he couldn't beat press and he couldn't get off the line of scrimmage. But okay, we're highlighting this rep down the field 10 seconds into a play, apparently, which is not translatable to the next level. I think he's a big target. I think he's got very strong hands. I think he could be a solid third to fourth option in the wide receiver room. But if we're talking top 100, man, like, no thanks. No thanks. There's nothing dynamic about him. He actually tested better than I thought he would. He's not that guy on film. Like, he's just not. And I know that everyone wants to run with it because it's Jerry Rice's son and the lineage and USC. And I get it, man. Trust me. I don't think he's a bad football player by any stretch. But I also think that when we're trying to highlight a play that I look at and I say, that's a sack, that's not translatable. He's going against the one corner that he went against, the play I'm talking about was against Johnny Dixon at the Senior Bowl, who is the other Penn State corner in this class other than Kalen King, right? And Johnny Dixon is a 6th to 7th round pick. That's what he is. He might find a roster in 2024, excuse me. And he got mugged. He got absolutely mugged against Brendan Rice, who is 6'3", 210 pounds, and a physically very impressive kid. So if we're talking third or fourth option, in a wide receiver room potentially, I'm cool with that, man. But we need to not make people who they aren't because of what their last name is all my thing, right? Like, this is a little bit of a situation where I think the name is a little bigger than the game, if that makes sense.
So wait a second. You're saying that Brendan Rice isn't automatically Jerry Rice? What?
But believe it or not, that does not technically translate just because of his last name. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
This is wildly disappointing because I was fully anticipating as soon as we get Brendan Rice, that is Jerry Rice. And instead of going Al Toon back in the day, we should have gone Jerry Rice apparently. And now we could make up for it with Brendan Rice. So this is devastating. I'm not sure how I'm going to recover from this, Ryan Roberts. But nonetheless, we will try to trek along here again. Ryan Roberts, our draft guru here on Boy Green Meets Wudi, joining us here on the show. Again, you can check out a lot of his work at the College Sports Wire. I want to bring up another Hog Maui. He's not going to go in the first round, and who knows, maybe he'll be a second or third round pick. Christian Haynes, the big man, interior offensive lineman out of UConn. He's met with the Jets at his pro day and both at a private visit at the NFL Combine. He had a private meeting with the New York Jets. What do you think about him? And it also kind of speaks to potentially of people saying you can find starting level guards in other rounds, not named the first.
Well, I think that Christian Haynes could play guard or center potentially, right? Like, he's played nothing but right guard during his UConn career, but I see the flexibility and movement skills working up to the second level and comboing where I think that he could definitely be a center as well. And I've heard nothing but rave reviews as far as his football intelligence and his character, right? So I think that he could play center if he needed him to, but I also think that he is a guy that could definitely slide in a guard. He reminds me a little bit of Shaq Mason, who's been a long time just good player in the NFL, right? Like, he's played guard, he's played center. I think that Christian Haynes was a little bit undervalued early in the process because he's a little bit sawed off. He's sub 6'3". He's not the tallest guy of all time, but then he had nearly 34-inch arms at the combine, and he plays well outside of his frame. He's just got his footwork needs to be a little bit more efficient, but man, he moves up to the second level so well. He's got really good flexibility, and he's got developing power where I think that he's going to be plus in power when he hits a NFL strength and conditioning program. So I think I would say Christian Haynes comfortably in the top 45 to 50 picks. And I think you're getting a starting interior offensive lineman on the next level.
Damn. Okay. All right. Spicy. I like
He's a good player, man.
Hopefully,
He's a good player.
Hopefully, not for his sake. I'm sure he wants to go as high as possible to get that moolah. But boy, I'm hoping he's a little slip and slide action down the board for the New York Jets. That's what I'm hoping. But perhaps, with the pick 72, unless there's some sort of trade back or move up, I don't know if that'll happen. Go ahead, Ryan.
Well, the positive for you in that instance is that it is a very deep offensive line class this year, right? So we're talking about guys maybe fluctuating as far as potentially falling a little bit just based upon the pure volume of the class. It's always possible.
Okay, juicy. All right, let's throw it back to you, Wudi. Go ahead.
I'm keeping it with the offensive line because that's what we need. That's what we need. I even put in my tape, but nobody called back. When we look at guys, Jordan Morgan was actually brought into the facility, right? This is somebody who had a top 30 visit, right, with the Jets. He also had a meeting at the Senior Bowl. He had a meeting at the Combine. They seem to like him at least a little bit, maybe a lot of bit. How do you see him faring in the draft? Would you put him in the top 2 rounds?
I would be okay with him in the late second round. I would be okay with it. He's a guy that's grown on me in the process a little bit, but I'm not like super bullish on as some people are. There's some people that think he could play offensive tackle in the NFL, and I just don't see that. I just don't. I think he's more of a linearly explosive player who has a good power profile. But if we're talking about being on an island, potentially at left tackle, which is obviously where he played at Arizona, he's got sub 33-inch arms, and I'm all for betting on outliers, but I would tell everyone that if you want to have a fun exercise, go to Mock Draftable and look up all offensive tackles that have historically below 33-inch arms and find one that's good. And that would, and you're not going to find one. It just hasn't happened, man. It just hasn't happened. There's since 1999, I don't think there's been a single offensive tackle who's been a long-term starter or a Pro Bowler with sub 33-inch arms. Now, does that mean that Jordan Morgan can't be that guy? I guess it's possible, but you're betting on an outlier personally. I think as a interior player, as a guard who could potentially get you out of a game at offensive tackle, I'm okay with that, right? I think he has some starting ability on the inside. I just think that the conversation between him is, and some people are really for this, is he's a tackle on the next level. I'm just I don't know if I see that, man. And he would be defying all the odds if he ended up being an offensive tackle in the NFL.
Very interesting. Well, sometimes people will try to believe what they want to believe, especially at the offensive tackle position when they get later. If they can't convince themselves to get one of those top-tier guys, they're like, yeah, we can save it. We can do it. Yeah. Let's project it. We'll speak it into existence. Let's make it happen. And that's how sometimes people lose their job. So we'll see ultimately where he goes. Ryan, we appreciate so much of the insight on all these prospects. You did live up to the hype. With all my talking, maybe it was impossible, but you achieved the impossible, which is probably not the first time you've ever done that. So, Ryan, before we get you out of here, we got a couple hundred people in the room right now. Where can they find your work, mock drafts, and other juicy deets on all things draft? Again, we're 9 days out. If you're watching this live here on the show as we're recording this on a Tuesday afternoon, or if you're watching after the fact, make sure you check your dates respectively. Dates subject to change depending on when the hell you're listening to this thing or watching this thing, rather. But it's 9 days out. Where can people find your work?
Yeah, so you can follow me first and foremost on Twitter at Rise and Draft, or RISEN Draft, like shake and bake. That is where I would just suggest kind of the following starts, because I'm working on consolidating all of my content into one spot, and I actually have a pretty cool announcement that I'm probably going to be making pretty soon after the draft. So it's a little bit of a teaser there. But right now I'm on College Sports Wire on the USA Today network, where I'll have a bunch of team-specific mock drafts kind of winding down. I'll have some player interviews winding down and a big mock draft winding down. Also on the Believe Podcast Network, we are at First Team NFL Draft and College Football Podcast. Joe DeLeon And Matt Sims, former Jets quarterback Matt Sims,
Yeah,
is
that's
also
right.
a part of our podcast as well. So if you want to come by and check it out, I would greatly appreciate it. And thank you guys so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate you guys flexibility wise and everything. Always fun to talk draft. And I thank you guys so much.
Yeah, and I'll just tell you, I'm getting all these comments of great interview. This guy's the best. So, okay, I'm glad. First off, you should have known who the hell Ryan Roberts was before this interview, for God's
Yeah,
sakes.
man.
But if that's the only thing I can contribute, when I'm in the grave, I hope the first thing on my tombstone is I introduced Ryan Roberts to some level of Jets Twitter and Jets YouTube. And if I did, my life is complete. I've done God's work. That's it.
Paul, you are doing great work in general. So I am not a Jets fan, but I am subscribed to your YouTube channel because you guys do such a great job. Keep it up, my friends.
All right. Thank you so much. Wudi, great stuff. And we'll be back on Thursday to break down some more prospects, man.
Absolutely, Ryan. Appreciate your time. This is the knowledge that I needed, the perspective that I did not have. All right. I had an appointment with an optometrist, but I'm going to cancel that because you helped me see the light right now. So I appreciate that. I appreciate you. And yeah,
I'm gonna steal that for my kids later. They're gonna enjoy that dad joke. Man. That was fantastic.
That's phenomenal. Thanks everybody for tuning in again, whether you're watching live or after the fact. Make sure you guys like the video, hit subscribe, and check us out on all social media. We appreciate it. Thanks everybody, and we'll see you next time. Take care.